Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. A young woman inherits a rundown pub and discovers a dark secret within its basement. Baghead, a shape shifting creature that will let you speak to lost loved ones, but not without consequence. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Baghead. Well, Luke, I think it's pretty safe to say that IFC and Shudder, that little pairing, that little duo, they have been really knocking it out of the park this year with films like Stop Motion. Late Night with the Devil was another recent one that we saw. I mean, they've just really seemed to be bringing all of the punches. And of course, we've got things like Infested coming up later this month and In a Violent Nature, which we're very much looking forward to. Baghead was one that before they even acquired it, I had heard of. This was one that was kind of making the rounds. I remember when the poster dropped, people were kind of curious as to what this was, and then kind of fell off the face of the earth, it seems like, until we recently found out that it'll be on Shudder. Where did you first hear about Baghead?
I heard about it at the beginning of the year when we were kind of prepping our lists of, what we were looking forward to in 2024. So it wasn't something that was something I zeroed in on. It was something that was just kind of my peripheral. And I, did a little research, but nothing too in-depth, I guess. And then I quickly discarded it. And really, I'm like mostly everyone kind of forgot about this one until, popped up back on our radar to do this review. So it was something where I just kind of checked out. I think maybe I watched a little bit of a trailer, but nothing too in-depth. So I went into this one, I would say, a little more cold than a lot of our other things that we've seen, just because I think I saw a little bit of the trailer at the beginning of the year and then just kind of completely forgot about it.
Yeah, and that's really again where I kind of was with it as well. I just knew that it was coming out, but I didn't really hear much about it. And then it just came into our laps. We were lucky enough to get a screener from the folks over at Shudder and IFC. And we got a chance to check it out tonight. And Luke, tell me, how are you feeling about Baghead?
This one, it started off strong for me. I tell you, I think they had a good handle on it. I thought it was something fairly creative. It was kind of reminiscent of Talk to Me a little bit, I think, just with the basic idea there of being able to speak to loved ones and kind of having this, 2-minute window, so to speak, of, you can only speak with them for a certain period of time before, our entity takes control back. I thought there was a lot of tension at the very beginning, but I got to be honest. There's a point in this, and we'll dive into it, that I find this film to completely deflate and become pretty formulaic.
Yes, I would have to agree with you 100%. This movie, for a little while, is pretty interesting. They do offer a lot of really creative and honestly some very creepy ideas that could be used very, very effectively. And I think for the majority of the film, they do a pretty good job of that. They really kind of lean into this. They really let the characters play with what exactly this kind of witch type creature thing in the basement is. They never really give you a complete full answer, which is very similar to another film that I just covered about a bag called Bag of Lies, where that also has some kind of an entity type creature that we don't get a whole lot of an explanation for. But where I think Bag of Lies is able to kind of keep the narrative moving and keep things interesting and keep that creativity for the most part, I really feel like Baghead, after a while, just falls into the generic, this is about what we expected from a modern day kind of horror film. And, I only say that because I think right before we hit record, the word that I threw at this was Blumhouse, very much a Blumhouse style horror. This feels like something that would come out in January from one of these, like Lionsgate, just kind of a horror movie we're just throwing out there. Now, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it certainly loses all of its gas probably about an hour into the movie.
And you had said Blumhouse, and it was, I kind of smiled on the inside a little bit, I think, because as I was going through this film and I was watching it, and actively in my head I was saying certain things, and I went in really cold. I did not know this was based off of a short film.
Mhm.
And as I was watching this film, and we get to the point where we do get an explanation of why the things are happening and this kind of backstory. And it is told through a series of photos. And for me, it went on for a little bit longer than I felt it should. It was a big exposition dump, and it just felt a little forced. It felt like we filmed everything and then we were like, we don't have enough of a backstory, so let's kind of drop in a little bit of an element of kind of hand holding the audience exactly why we're here and why this entity does what it does. And after that, I feel like, that was the trigger for me to say things really got formulaic after that. And as I was watching this film, I was thinking to myself, this would be a great short film. This seems like a great concept for a short film. And then as I was getting further into it, it kind of affirmed me where I was like, now it feels like we're reaching. It feels like we had a great scene, we had a great concept that really didn't have that much of a backstory. And then it was like, okay, we're making this into a feature. We got to put some connective tissue in here. And that's what it really felt like. And to be honest, as we look at this, this was initially, as that short film in 2017, was directed by this director and written by Lorcan Riley, sole writer. Now, as we get into the feature film, it's told by three. And who is
I
one of
just
those?
saw where you're going with this. Yeah, I
This
was like, where are
is
you going? And I
this
get
is
it now.
co-written by Bryce McGuire, who also had a hand in Night Swim.
He
So
directed it.
yes, directed, and also I believe he co-written it. And so it really felt like it really did fall into this basic formulaic what we do get from Blumhouse, what we get from a lot of general audience horror. Because it felt like that first part was that short film. And then we brought in people to say, we got to put in jump scares. We got to do something that is going to appeal to a wider audience. And you definitely feel that. And once you get past that narrative of that backstory, it's like it turns almost into a different film for me.
Yeah, I mean it just falls into those tropes that we expect from a concept like this. And I think that's when you compare it to, cuz like when you watch the film and the brief description that we got getting to contact lost loved ones is the approach here, but it is very similar to Talk to Me where you're contacting the other side. And I did sit there and I was saying where my wife and I both watched this and they had said I really, really like this idea, but I feel like they just didn't do enough, and I really feel like it just lost its way as the film progressed. And that's when I said to them, I was like, "You should watch Talk to Me." Like still haven't shown them that, and I don't know why, but I'm like that is an example of how to keep this idea fresh and keep it moving. As to where this one again, it does kind of at one point lay all its cards out on the table, and I think that's the worst thing you can do. And that's the same thing that Night Swim does. It lays all the cards out on the table, and then it's kind of just, all right, we're just waiting for the pen to drop, and then we'll see how it ends. It either ends good or it ends bad. And yeah, I mean that's pretty much what this film does. It just kind of gets to a certain point where all of our cards are played, and the third act is just your stereotypical modern horror third act. Like, I think they do one interesting thing, but it's so quick and it's so close to the end of the movie that they don't really give you enough time to resonate with it. But it does honestly feel like a punch that's been pulled. It almost feels like if we would have done this maybe 10-15 minutes earlier and kind of lived in that space for a bit with this other character, we could have found some new avenues to do something cool. But they just really were like, what can be our final punch to the gut here? Let's just do this. And it feels very much like a last minute addition.
Yeah, it felt like, I think toward the end, there are a couple intriguing ideas that they pull out of their hat, but it never really hits because I feel like we're winding down, we're getting closer to the end of the film, and it's just been so formulaic up until that point that it's hard to get back in that groove that they had you in at that very start of the film. So it was really hard to kind of get back in it for me, even though, yeah, the ending is like, oh, okay, well, I did not necessarily see that ending coming. But it doesn't save the film for me. It's just I as the credits were rolling, I felt a little more underwhelmed than I thought I was going to be. Especially, I actually verbalized at the very beginning. I was like, unless this film completely falls apart, I think it's going really well, and it did completely fall apart for me toward the end. So it did. There wasn't really any saving it toward the end for me. I think we were past that point. It again, we go into our basic jump scares, and there isn't really too many unique things into it after that certain point. It just becomes a basic horror movie.
Yeah, and I will say there are still some positives that I can take away from this. Freya Allan, she is the lead actress here. Um, I was trying to figure out where I knew her from, and looking here, it's The Witcher, so that's where it comes from. But I was having a bit of a hard time. I mentioned this to you, where it's like I just could not pinpoint how old this character was supposed to be. So it's one of those things. We're looking at her actual birthday. She was born in 2001, so yeah, she's in her early 20s. But it's like one of those things where it's just like, to me, I was just having a really tough time because she just seems the way, I don't know if it was the way she was written, the way they dressed her, she just felt like a 15-year-old kid who acquired this bar. And it just felt so weird. It was hard to get by. I can't put that on her, but all in all, I mean, I think she's a great actress. I don't know if there's a lot here for her to really latch onto, but I mean, I think that she did fine with what it was. Jeremy Iron, I like him a lot too. He was him, and funny enough, the guy who plays the dad in this, that would be the Peter Mullan. They were both in the film War Horse. Great actors, really excellent here, and I felt like those two really did do a lot as far as carrying the film. I think that the dad character especially has a lot of really interesting bits, especially the way that they use said creature and him. I thought there were some good moments with that. Nothing mind blowing, nothing that's going to really sit there and say, oh, this is something that I'm going to be thinking about as we get into our best of the years later here. But I think that the cast was definitely not the problem in this film. It definitely comes down to a concept issue. And I do want to say, I think that the effects, although a good majority of them are digital and they are clearly digital, I do got to say they really stuck out like a sore thumb to me. And that's, again, what really makes this feel like modern horror. Especially, it's disappointing because I think the design of the creature and how they use it actually came off really strong. I felt like there was some really good practical effects there. And for what this film was, I just don't see why they went with so many digital effects. I really think you could have gotten away with some really unique practicals.
Yeah, and as we start off the film, there is a very, for me, jarring CGI fire. And for me, that kind of, I was a little hesitant going into it because I was like, is this what we're in for the majority of the film? But and when those effects do pop up, I will say they're a little jarring. But I agree with you. I like the creature design. I liked the tone, the setting there. I think the bar was a great
Mhm.
dark setting. Real nice design there, especially being in the basement was really well done. And then they have an element in the basement where this creature comes from, which I
Love
thought,
that.
yeah, I thought that was rather interesting. And to kind of dive deeper into the creature's lair or something, I think would have been very interesting. Kind of had a little bit of that barbarian feel. I mean, it just
Yeah.
not, I'm not comparing it, but I'm saying, you could have gotten something out of it. I think, more mileage from that, because I think
Yeah.
you had that tone there. But, I think, again, it became that formulaic horror film. But I think, the setting, that tone was really well done for what they did show us. But, I would have loved to have opened that up a little bit more and kind of get a little more mileage out of there. But, I think performances, nothing necessarily stood out. I did like Peter Mullan, probably overall, for me, was probably the standout. And then kind of those interactions between being able to speak with your loved ones, and then kind of those moments where they turn darker, I thought were really well done.
Hmm.
But then, it just kind of, at some point, it just became, again, I keep going back to formulaic. And it's one of those things where it was hard to get out of it. Felt like at times you're spinning your tires. So, for me, I really strong start to this one. Fizzled out at the end there. It just didn't really hit for me. Honestly, I'm probably gonna go proceed with caution on this one. I think that first half is something that I think people should check out, but other than that, it really just doesn't do too many favors for anyone.
Yeah, I think that this definitely gets more of a pass because it is going to be direct to streaming. So it's not like you have to go out and rush out to the theater, pay, the premium price to see it. So I think that's probably why it ended up there. Which is, again, no hate on Shudder or IFC. They've really been knocking it out of the park this year. But yeah, this is a proceed with caution for me as well. It's not bad enough or offensive enough for me to say that it's a slash it. But I just don't even know if it's necessarily worth a watch. I think like you've seen movies like this before. You've seen concepts done like this that have been done better. And yeah, I just feel like over at the end of the day, it just turned into kind of a nothing burger. But again, not offensively bad. Not something that I'm like, oh, I can't believe I sat down and watched that. It's more just like that's a movie. That's on my list of what I watched this year. I might mention it at the end of the year when we do our full ranking of everything we've watched or whatever we end up doing this year. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Honestly, really happy that I wasn't anticipating it too hard because maybe I would have taken it a lot harder. But yeah, I was really hoping for a lot more out of it. But yeah, guys, I think that's going to wrap us up here for Baghead. We got a lot of interesting stuff up on the channel right now as far as content goes. We did check out Sting, which is a lot of fun. Definitely check that review out. We had a good time talking about that one. And I recently, like I said, got to see another film about a bag. This one called Bag of Lies. Definitely not bad. Definitely more entertaining than I would say Baghead was. So if you're going to pick a movie with a bag that's streaming this weekend, I would say Bag of Lies. So other than that, guys, that's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.